Welcome back to a Christmas Eve edition of the Musketeer Report podcast. Xavier is 9-4 overall, 1-1 in Big East play. The Musketeers are ranked 102 in KenPom and 121 in the net. They are coming off a 41-point loss at home to Creighton and a 3-point win at Georgetown. And that's where we'll start this show. I do have questions from you guys from the premium message board at musketeerreport.com. We'll talk about that more as we go along. But first, I want to start with the last two games that I just referenced there. 41-point loss at home to Creighton, 3-point win at Georgetown. How do you reconcile those two performances? Ultimately, I come back to the fact that this team is good enough when things are going its way, when they're playing well, when shots are falling, when the matchup works out. They're good enough to compete with a lot of teams in this conference. And that's exciting for fans, I think, because there was a time earlier this year that we weren't sure that was going to be the case. And I think the 3-point win at Georgetown, that bounce back following the putrid effort against Creighton, was a good sign in that regard. A good sign that, okay, yeah, like that's just who this team is to some extent. They didn't play well for a stretch and then all of a sudden lose it, and now they're not going to win another game in Big East play. At the same time, I think we saw, that stretch they had that included the wins over West Virginia and Cincinnati may have come against some teams that were struggling. And Xavier was definitely playing better. They definitely improved, but they also caught some teams that they matched up well with at the right time. And the Crosstown shootout win was huge. There's no doubt about it. I think that was unexpected coming into the season. So fans are certainly going to take that one, and it brings a lot of goodwill with it for this team. But when this group doesn't make shots, and they're not tough on defense, and the matchup is bad for them, or the front court doesn't show up, look out. Because I think we're going to get performances similar to that 41-point home loss to Creighton. Now, I don't think they're going to set records every time they lose, hopefully, but I don't think that's the last ugly loss we've seen for this group. I think their margin for error is just so thin. Like if Jovan and Trey Carroll have a bad game, that the switch to the smaller, spread you out front court was a lot of what had this team playing better. They didn't show up against Creighton. They didn't play well. Part of that's because of Creighton. Part of that, I think, is because of them. All of a sudden, it just felt like Xavier couldn't do anything in that game when they didn't have the front court going. So I did think it was great that those two guys bounced back and played well at Georgetown. That was a good sign. But in terms of what this sets up for the rest of the way, I think it sets up for some fun, maybe even unexpected wins going forward. But you're also going to have to take with that some frustrating losses that maybe you shouldn't lose, and maybe a few more ugly losses like the Creighton one. And ultimately, I think they end up with a record that's not very good. We'll talk more about that as we go along in this show. So let's get into your guys' questions. Now, with these questions, I did go through them and grab the ones that I felt like I had the best answers for right now. Like if I saw it and I was like, oh yeah, like let's talk about that. I added it to the list. Also, stuff that tended to be more timely and about this current team. I know everyone has big picture questions about NIL and money and where things are going in the future and all of that stuff that gets asked every time we do Q&A shows like this. And I understand why people want to know about it. I don't have issues talking about it, but also I'm just like, it gets a little exhausting and boring, and we could literally just talk about that every single time. So I wanted to stick with questions that were a little bit more about this year's team and where Xavier is currently at. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. We'll start off with, is 19 or 20 wins being too ambitious? Yes, I think it is. Definitely. I think I can get them to 15 wins. So 15 and 16 overall. The way I do that is they're sitting at 9 wins currently. I think if I was going to do the win-loss game like Paul and I do at the beginning of the season, I would probably pick out 5 more wins the rest of the way. At DePaul, home against Providence, home against DePaul, home against Marquette, home against Georgetown. Now, nothing with this team is a slam dunk right now. Like, those 5 games are not a slam dunk. They could lose to any of those teams. And the rest of the games that I'm not mentioning, there's a possibility they could win some of those. Like, the Big East is pretty weak in the middle to bottom of it right now, so there are definitely going to be other games that they're going to have a chance at. But those are the 5 that I would pick out right now if I was doing the win-loss game. I would say those 5 are wins. And then you figure they're going to get one more somewhere else that I'm not naming. So at least one more. So that's how I get to 15. You're at 9 right now. Those 5 teams that I named put you at 14. Add one more in, get you to 15 and 16 overall. That's where I would be. I'd probably, if you told me to set the over-under, it'd probably be 15 and a half, maybe 14 and a half. but that's where I'd be at on him right now. So yeah, I think 19 or 20 wins is too ambitious in my opinion. Xavier is currently shooting 35.9% from three after reaching as high as 39.1% coming home from Charleston. Would you take the over-under on that 35.9% mark for the end of the season three-point percentage? I think I would go under on that. Sitting at 35.9 right now. I know they were all the way up at 39. I mentioned when they were shooting 39% as a team, like that's going to come down to earth some, right? You had Jovan shooting well over 50%. I know All Right was shooting a crazy percentage, and he still is shooting a really high percentage. But some of those guys were going to come down to earth with their three-point shooting percentage after that initial spurt there where they were playing really well and everyone seemed to be hitting threes. Just running through the team right now, though, Trey Carroll's sitting at about 38%. That feels a bit high for him. I think he'll come down slightly. Roddy Anderson sitting at just over 30% feels about right for him. Jovan's at 42%. I think he could shoot that well, but my guess is he comes down closer into that like 37, 38 range over the course of the season. So I would guess he drops a little. Now, Malik Messina Moore, that's the guy that I would have some hope for in terms of upside, shooting better and improving the team's overall percentage, because I think his volume will increase as we go. We've started to see that the last few games, and he's a better shooter than 27%. So he's a guy that could get up over 36, 37, 38%, whatever. He's done that before in his career. He's playing at a higher level now, but I think he's closer to a 40% three-point shooter than I do a 27% three-point shooter where he's at right now. So if he can climb up closer to that 40% mark, that would really help the group. Phillips sitting around 29% now. That's closer to what he is. I think he's more of like a somewhere between 30 to 33% shooter. I don't think he's going to be very good, but he's not as bad as he started the season shooting. Then All Right sitting at about 46% still. So my guess is that number is going to come down a little bit. So yeah, I would say most of those guys I mentioned are probably going to trickle down a little bit. Messina Moore might help you even that out or even increase it slightly, but my guess is they're going to be below that 35.9% mark at the end of the season from three-point range. Sorry about my voice, guys. It's not holding up as well as I thought it might. I've been drinking cough syrup like a rapper from the South, but hasn't worked so well. All right, compare Roddy Anderson and All Right so far in Big East play. Well, Roddy's been better. There's no doubt about that. He's scored 20 more points than All has. Both of them have turned the ball over a little bit. Both of them have 3 turnovers in those 2 Big East games. I mean, it's only a 2-game sample size, so I'm not willing to draw big conclusions here from these 2 games about these 2 guys, but that's the question. I don't think there's any doubt that Roddy has played better than All in 2 games, but it is just 2 games. I do want the concern has always been that All Right is going to struggle in Big East play because of the size and the physicality and the athleticism. He's a smaller guard who's a scorer who doesn't have good physical tools. That's a concern. But he started the season slow, and then he came on and was a part of the reason the team had some success there through that stretch. So I don't think we've heard the last from Roddy Anderson or from All Right. I think he's going to continue to be a factor. I think he'll play better at some point. But first 2 games, Roddy Anderson has been the better player, no doubt about it. Comments on why Richard doesn't feel like the second foul in the first half matters much when other coaches definitely do. Because coaches have different philosophies. Just like some will foul up 3 at the end of the game and some won't. This is just his philosophy on things. Now, you're right about that. Xavier is like top 50 in the country in terms of 2 foul participation percentage. But I would definitely lean towards Richard's philosophy here. You shouldn't foul out your best players before they're disqualified. I see so often a guy gets 2 fouls early in the first half, then he sits the rest of the first half. Not only have you limited one of your better players' minutes, assuming it's one of your better players, not only have you limited his minutes significantly, but you've also completely taken him out of the flow of the game. Like now he's got to try to get himself going in the second half, and it's weird, and I'm just not for that. I'd much rather let the guy play. You know, if he picks up a third in the first half, yeah, then you gotta probably do something about that then. But I'm much more on the side of let them actually get themselves into foul trouble first. Like 2 fouls, you're not even halfway there yet. That's not foul trouble to me. It's not good. Like, yeah, you gotta be a little more careful defensively, maybe change your game a little bit, but I'm not getting too worked up about the 2 foul thing the way a lot of coaches like to do. I agree with Richard on that one. which underclassman has the brightest future at Xavier and is most likely to stay? If you're talking about the overlap, it's definitely Jovan in terms of brightest future and most likely to stay. I think he's the correct answer for each of these questions individually, too. I mean, you're talking about a 6'10 guy who can really stretch the floor and shoot the three at a high rate. Now, again, I think he might come down a little bit from that 42% he's shooting right now. We've already seen him come down some, and he's definitely limited on the defensive end. So, I don't love the idea of Xavier going into next year with like Jovan's going to be our starting center no matter what and going to play a lot of the minutes or anything like that. But I do think out of the current underclassmen, he's probably shown the most promise. And obviously there's a huge caveat here in that we haven't seen Gabriel Posado yet. But I think he probably has the brightest future. And in terms of most likely to stay, no question, I would choose him. I mean, he transferred from New Mexico to Xavier because of Richard Pitino. So my guess is if they want him to stay, he's going to be around next year. Now, you never say for certain in the current era of the sport with the transfer portal and everything, but I think he's the most likely to be back out of any of those guys. And like I said, I also think he probably has the brightest future too. So I'll go with Jovan. Xavier has 6 scholarship players with remaining eligibility: Mir, Pop, All, Anthony, Jovan, and Roddy. If you had to guess, over or under 2.5 returners from that group? I'm going over. I mean, just like my immediate reaction to it is like Pop, All, and Jovan. I think all 3 of those are guys that you could see developing. I think they're all 3 guys that Xavier would probably like to have back and would probably fit the budget for them next year. I don't think those guys are actually are currently exploding in value, but I do think they have potential to develop and could be back. But at the same time, all of these guys individually, if you told me they could be back, I could say yes to any of these. Like none of them seem like they're for sure going to be forced out or like they're completely unhappy and are going to want to leave. I mean, I guess if you're saying right now who's the most likely to leave out of this group, it's probably Anthony or Mir right now. That would be most unhappy with their roles. But you could talk me into any of these guys coming back and wanting to develop here. I think it's probably unlikely that all of them are back, but on an individual basis, you could talk me into any of them. And I think there's a path for any of them to come back still. I don't think any of them have been like, oh, he's for sure gone after this season at this point. Good question. Do you see any of these players as people worth building a roster around, or is it more likely that players returning after this season will be supporting bigger gets from the portal? Well, first, again, the biggest caveat here is that we haven't seen Gabriel Posado yet. So that could change things. Maybe he'll be that type of player. Currently, though, I feel like this team needs to add its best player from the portal next season. I just don't think they have that go-to guy. I mean, you could maybe say right now Trey Carroll is that guy for them, and that would be the case, but he's not coming back next year. So, they need that Sule Boom hit, that Quincy Oliveri hit in the portal, like Xavier's been able to find in recent history. I think they need a go-to type of player like that. Now, that's hard. It's hard to find a go-to player in the portal, especially now. I think a couple years ago when you found a Sule Boom, Sean Miller and his staff, it was a little bit easier than it currently is, especially for a program like Xavier. So we'll see. There are fewer talented players in the portal than there were at that time, and the dollar amounts that they're demanding are even higher. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I think you're looking to get your best player out of the portal this upcoming spring, which is not an ideal scenario to be in, but we've also seen Xavier manage that in the portal era already. Who's more likely to contribute as a freshman, Kalik House or Asher Elson, and why? I'm going to say Kalik House here, in my opinion, without a doubt. He is more college ready, in my opinion, because he's a good defender. He can make shots from the perimeter. He's tough, and his family is familiar with Coach Pitino. I think his brother, his dad can help get him ready for the college level. Asher Elson is more of an upside play, I think. He reminds me of McKinday London a lot. There's a lot of upside there. If everything works out for him, he could be special. But I think he's also going to need to refine his game. That's often the case with those taller, skilled, face-up hybrid forward type guys. Unless they're like the absolute 5-star type prospects that are no doubters, then a lot of times they have to figure out what's actually going to work for them and make them efficient at the college level. And I think that's a process that Asher is going to have to go through once he gets here. But you never know in this day and age. It's definitely getting tougher to judge, I think, and especially when you have guys playing in things like overtime elite, which he is, it can be difficult to judge exactly how their games will fit in a real college setting. But right now, my read on that would be Kalik House. How much do you think the team's performance and position in the Big East standings plays into Pizzado's return? I think it could definitely play a factor, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that I had a really good feel for what he's thinking there. The people that I've talked to around the program have seemed to think he's coming back, that he wants to play, that he's working his way back. So I have no reason to go against that. But I do know that the sport has changed a lot. There are more people involved in these decisions than ever. Players have agents. So they're going to weigh options, I'm sure, and they're going to discuss this. But right now I would expect him to come back. There's also the chance, though, I'm not saying Xavier's done this, but I have heard of other guys in situations like this where, hey, like it might make sense for you to redshirt, get an extra year of being paid in college, whatever. And they say something along the lines like, if you'll re-up for another year at this dollar amount, we'll agree to redshirt you now and we'll just move on with that process. So I don't know if that's something that they're considering at all. I have not heard that, but that's just something I've seen happen at other schools where a guy like is kind of weighing his options and thinking, well, it does kind of make sense to redshirt in this current day and age if I can still get paid at least some of what I was supposed to get paid and then retain that year of eligibility and get paid for another year of college basketball down the line. I think guys are definitely interested in doing that in certain cases, and that could be the case here. But again, for the school, you're like, hey, we've paid you money already. We're willing to pay you more, but you've also used our resources to rehab and everything like that. We want to make sure you're coming back next year if we're going to agree to redshirt you. Otherwise, we'd rather get those last few months of the season use out of you if you're just going to take off in the transfer portal. So again, none of that necessarily relates to Xavier and Gabriel Pizzado in terms of those last things I just said. I have not heard of those conversations happening, but I do know that that's happened across the country at other schools. It's different the way these things are discussed and handled now. If you take the core of this year's group, all Roddy, Jovan, and Gabriel Pizzado, and bring them back next year, what kind of player is priority number one to bring in? I would go with a rim protecting and rebounding center. And the reason I get so specific with it there is because I think you're going to have to make concessions in the transfer portal. It's really hard to just say, yeah, let's bring in a guy that can score with his back to the basket, block shots, and rebound for any type of reasonable dollar amount in the current transfer portal. So you're going to have to make concessions. I don't think you're going to find like a total stud, a dominant player, but I do think, Richard Pitino's style on the defensive end would prefer to have a rim protector, a real rim protector back there, and some more athleticism. They're pretty limited with Jovan playing the center position. And I know that was never the plan coming into the season, and it's what gave them a chance because it made them so much better offensively and changed just the style of play overall. But going forward, I would imagine they'd much prefer to have a legit rim protector and rebounder, if nothing else, to pair with him. So you can play kind of offense, defense a little bit with your matchups and your rotations. So that would be my first priority, I think. But, it's hard to say without seeing Gabriel Pizzado first. Like, if he's a stud and you really got something with a bigger, more athletic wing there, then that kind of takes that need off the table. If not, or if he's more of a role guy and he's not a scorer, then I might look into something like that as well as kind of like that second priority. Any news on the scheduling front for next season? I'm curious to see Pitino's approach to building the non-conference schedule. Not really, not at this point. I think scheduling, much like everything else in college basketball right now, comes down to the final revenue share number. I think Xavier's staff will probably wait till they see what that comes out to, and then they'll try to get a feel for what the teams in the Big East have, but more so when we're talking about scheduling, teams across the country, other conferences, where they're at. And the thing that I'm hearing more and more, and if you've been listening to press conferences, you'll hear coaches in their post-game press conferences constantly right now talk about, well, they spent much more than us in NIL, and that's here's how the game went. We won, or we looked pretty good against them, or we competed well, or whatever. But a lot of coaches are bringing up how much more the team they just played spent than them in NIL. And the thing I've heard about that is going forward, I think you're going to hear a lot of teams talking about trying to stay within their weight class, quote unquote, when it comes to scheduling. Talking about schedule teams that are spending about as much money as you are for your roster. And that's concerning to me. I mean, I really don't like hearing that because I think scheduling is already a disaster and schools just ducking good competition because they're in the name of, NIL, schools paying too much money for revenue share. It's like, hate to tell you, but these schools have always been paying more than you for their rosters. I know it's different now, but this just stinks for the sport. But I think it's a real thing. I think it's what you're going to hear going forward. So I don't think you would expect to see Xavier play anyone with an obviously large gap in resources. So, scratch Kentucky off the table for next year. I don't think you're going to see that. There's also one thing that is kind of interesting about this and might open up some opportunity for some better competition, or at least one game, another high major game, is the NCAA rule change goes into effect next year, allowing one more non-conference game. Little thing they did with the MTEs and kind of changing how that's all looked at. So everyone's going to get an extra non-conference game next season. We've talked to Mario in the past on this podcast about scheduling. We talked to Ryan Reynolds too about it. And the thing that they've talked about is the lack of flexibility. When you have 20 conference games, you have the crosstown shootout. There have been other conference battles or different things that they've played in where they've had a game that was chosen for them to where they didn't really have a lot of flexibility with their own scheduling, especially because you want to have a certain amount of bye games in there as well. So that's a good thing going forward is that rule change, adding another non-conference game, adding a little more flexibility. That'll be good. But I do think Pitino has talked a lot about playing a tough schedule. So I think you can expect to see another high major on the schedule when you compare it to this year's slate. Like I do think it'll be increased a little bit probably, but again, the big thing that I would look for is schools talking about trying to stay within that spending number with their opponents. Like they want to play teams that are spending the same amount as them on their rosters for the most part. Is Mario still involved with the men's basketball program? And assuming we get new uniforms in the next couple of years, would he still be leading that effort? First of all, on the new uniforms, Nike always leads that charge. The schools give input. I'm sure Mario would definitely play some factor in that when that time comes. I do know Nike's like changing their process right now. They're in the midst of evolving to a new process with the schools. So I think we should see some more variety in the next year or two when it comes to Xavier's jerseys. Now, when it comes to Mario's role right now, he is shifted more towards NIL and rev share. That's been his main focus, I would say, at least for the last year. And that includes men's basketball, women's basketball. So he's doing more behind the scenes NIL, revenue share, money stuff right now. And that's why you've probably seen less of him around the men's basketball program and doing that type of stuff. With a lot of talk on the Skinny podcast recently about food offerings for media members, any good food stories from your years covering games at the Cintas Center? No good stories that I can think of, nothing like funny. We have been talking a little bit recently about like kind of the all-time power rankings for food offerings in the media room because right now we have agave and rye. And I would put that number one. And when you look around the media room, I'm like, by far the longest tenured guy in there at this point. So I've been giving my feedback on this when it's come up. I think I would go 1 agave and rye, which is our current deal. 2 would be BB Bop. We only had it for like a year or two, a couple years back, but thought that worked out really well for a pregame meal. It was good. And then number 3 was the thing we had when I first got there, City Barbecue. And we had it for like 5 or 6 years, maybe. It was several years when I first got there. And I didn't appreciate it enough at the time because, it got a little old. I got used to it. And you're young. You don't appreciate things as much. You just think every media room is going to be great that you go into. And so the City Barbecue was actually pretty solid. Worked out well for a pregame meal. But the agave and rye, BB Bop, City Barbecue would be my top 3. Can't think of anything else that really stands out. I'm always fine with pizza. I don't mind just a good slice of pizza if you go to that. There's a year or two where that happened. I think coming out of COVID maybe or something. So. Anyway, that would be my feedback on the food stuff. Nothing too interesting there. Sorry to disappoint, but Merry Christmas, everybody. Appreciate you guys listening to this. If you're traveling, be safe. Appreciate you guys being around all year, commenting on the message board and keeping the site lively. So thank you for that. And thank you for listening.